so the pricing question, it's a real puzzle, right? I mean, on the one hand, for general purpose technologies, like a screw that costs the same thing, whether it's in a smartphone or a car or an airplane or a spaceship or a refrigerator, right? It's always the same price. But in these applications, there's just orders of magnitude in difference between the price of the thing and the value, presumably, that's added. And so you've got arguments that pricing should be different in these other markets. And there are arguments again on both sides of this. Honestly, the more specialized the technology is, so for a spacecraft, the connectivity standards are probably going to be different than they are for the refrigerator, and so it may justify differential pricing in some way. But one of the sort of the other side of this question is, how does this pricing get determined? And honestly, I don't think we've done a great job of that in the industry to date. The current mechanisms for setting these prices are really bilateral negotiations among parties. That's not particularly efficient if you're an implementer that has to negotiate with multiple SEP holders. It's not transparent, and it's what has led to a number of the debates and the big lawsuits that we've seen in the field. And so I think especially when you get to other industries where they're used to the IP price being built into the component cost, or at most subject to some sort of pool that has a transparent price attached to it. But these are all pretty lightweight mechanisms that an implementer can just, knows what the price is, build it into the BOM as Jim mentioned, and pay it without having to engage in a difficult negotiation where they don't know really what they're getting, and they have to pay a bunch of lawyers to do it. And so, as everybody on the call probably knows, I mean, I've advocated for more collective ways of figuring out these prices, either at the SDO or something alongside the SDO to figure out what the aggregate rates ought to be for the standards, and then allocate the total amount among SEP holders based on their contributions in some way. I mean, if the SDOs or some SDO-like bodies aren't willing to do that, there's always the possibility of giving this question to some sort of rate-setting panel that might exist outside of government, but independently funded by the industry to make these decisions and eliminate a lot of the disputes that we see around the determinations.
So yeah, what George is referring to is, the difference between like a top-down analysis on rates versus like a bottom-up, which is another way to value.
Right.
But I think one of the key things that we need to know is that and realize that, and it was sort of said at the very beginning, is that these standard technologies are an enabling technology for downstream implementers and participants. I've had this discussion many times, and even in our prep work, that nowadays, my kids on their cell phone actually using the phone function and calling their friends is sort of they would never think about doing that, right? They'd rather instant message them or DM them or FaceTime them or whatever it is. And so now you have like Facebook, now they just introduced like a video groups technology. For those of us that are online, most of us are online probably, if we are on our cell phones, we're using, some kind of cellular technology to do all this. So I've often heard the comparison to a lot of technology in this space as like just a brick or a tire or something like that. Is just sort of a component to this technology. But I would sort of argue that most of the stuff that you do on your cell phone, you wouldn't do but for this enabling technology. Most of the games out there you cannot play unless you're connected to the internet in some form or fashion. So I think, in relation to like when I was in business school, I took a class on pricing theory, and it's easy to value the brick that goes into a home, but if that home is on a 50 square foot lot versus on a 5 acres in Midtown Manhattan, you have kind of a different value of a brick. So I think it's a lot of the technology is value independent. Is dependent. I'm sorry, not is dependent on the value provided at the end of the day.